Alright, in this video I'm going to go over some of the updates that have been made. First of all, when you launch the main program, there is a menu for the four main items. Manage logs, so import logs, split logs. Standard plotting, so regular graphing. Path plotting, which plots by each path. And then SQL utilities, which is a little bit more than that. What's nice about this setup is that you can run multiple programs at once. So you could start logging, for example. The rest, this works as before. So if I go to status, you kind of see that's loading logs. So I can minimize that and I can start plotting. So let's do a recall plot. And then say you have a really large plot, you can go ahead and minimize that, let it load, and you can start another version of the plotting as well. So you can have parallel plots going at once, and then export, do whatever you need to do when they're done plotting. Now for the manage logs, the logging is sharing some files. So currently you can't run two of those at once, but in the future that's something we could break off. All right, for SQL utilities, this is grouped into two sections. One's like the main settings, where your root folder is for your logs, and that mostly allows you to go off on a jump drive. And then server name is related to the machine itself in which the software gets installed on, so it's more related to the installer that's coming. Database, you can go ahead and import and export tables. So if I want to export this table, for example, just hit export, and you can see it's rather quick, even for large logs, because it's a bulk export and import. So if I want to put that one back in place, I just highlight it and import it, and it goes back into the mix. And then I've got a separate section here where you can add and remove log descriptors. So that's like the base change, which should make it a lot easier to start parallel tasks. So now I'm going to go into some of the more specific functionality additions. Regarding the ability to edit the log descriptor, obviously you can do it in the SQL utility, but you can also hit this little settings button, and it allows you to just change log information by log. So you want to first load a log, so let me find one that actually has some data in it. Some of this is just data. Okay. So there's one. So you highlight your log as before, your message list, and then it'll pop up your info. And at this point, you can go ahead and change users, change any of the fields for that matter. The little search button here allows you to filter by any of the fields. So one or many. I can do Chris. And this will give me all logs that have been stored under your name. And then the refresh button goes back to the full list. So again, if I do Chris and I want to have Chicago, I'm not sure if there's any data here, but let's try. Yep, there's one log in here that's under Chris and Chicago. So now you can start to filter by the actual log info, any of the fields or all the fields. So another one is, I'm just going to go to a recall plot, go to this one. Alright, and then under edit axes and scales, I added scales, because that allows to scale data. I'm not sure if this is the best one to show, but if I want to center the Y, for example, I would select the second graph, the second axis, Y-axis, and center. It didn't do a whole lot, but if you had two graphs that were, way different, or it would be more of a case where you have three graphs really, but if you had multiple graphs and one was really out of place, you can select it and then center it in the X and the Y, and then you could also offset things. So if you wanted to manually start to shift a graph, you can do that. You kind of see where it's shifting. That's in the X. Start shifting in the Y. I can shift in the Y. If I want to scale, I can scale in the X and the Y. Alright, and then you can always reset. I'm going to let you play around with this. I'm not sure if I have a good data set to try things or really understand what you want to do with it, but we'll kind of go over this and let you start trying it. This is the same as before, by the way, so you can rename the axes and also change the secondary y-axis. So when it's set to 0, it means it's the primary, which is over here on the left. When it's set to 1, it's the axis over on the right, as far as the legend goes, or the scale. So the other thing I've completed is the path plotting. And to allow you to filter off end or front of a path. Let's see if I got a path here that I can. Okay, so I've got, this is the Bloom implement. And so if I go to measure paths, this all works the same as before. Go ahead and submit. These things are kind of all over the place. But you can see that this now allows you to remove endpoints from the start or from the end. So you can make your adjustments on either end, but the rest of it's the same functionality. And then in general, I just cleaned some things up and made some tip strips, notes. So if you hover over things, it'll tell you what these buttons do. For example, so press this button to, after highlighting a log, to hide it from the list. So more tip strips, and then some of the controls on the log importing have some additional descriptors on them now. So if I import something here, combine set, pick kind of a small one so it's fairly quick. Start. Yes. Go ahead and split this one. So once it splits, it asks me which of the logs I want to store, so I can remove things off here if I only wanted, for example, INS, VAXA. I just drag these out of here. I can kind of filter them this way. This is generally the same as before. If I want to store one message only, you can hit that. If I uncheck this, it'll reload the list. And then at that point, you can hit enter. And then when this completes and it starts to import data. I'll show you what that looks like as well. For example, when I display the column editor, put some notes. So a couple of these programs that are a little bit involved, I try to add some notes to the screen, and I'll add more if needed. And finally, one of the big items is in order to get ready for the installer and just updates, I've created a mechanism so it's easier to update the database. Basically, just stick a file with the updates in one place and it loads on startup of the program. So I will send you all the files you need to update your machine, and the my shop server is running as well, and you can use that.